Hi everyone, welcome to Learn English with Miss. In today's lesson, we will follow a step-by-step guide to writing our very own personal narrative essay. Number 1, brainstorming ideas for the narrative. Focus on a memorable event or moment in your life. The personal narrative should focus on a specific event or moment that was memorable or made a big impression on you. It does not need to be a major moment as long as it feels memorable and important to you. The event could have seemed minor at the time, but ended up being life changing for you. For example, you may write about your struggles with body image in high school and how you overcame them at a later time in your life. Or you may write about your disastrous or amazing 15th birthday party and how it affected your relationship with your sister. Expand on an important conflict in your life. That's right. Number 2 tells us to expand on an important conflict in our life. So, personal conflict can be great fodder for a personal narrative. Think about any strained relationships in your life or any moments of major conflict that you have experienced. Explore the conflict in detail in the narrative. For example, you can write a personal narrative about your complicated relationship with your friend, or you may write about a conflict you have with a sport you play or a club you are a part of. Number 3, think about a particular theme or idea. Use a theme as a jumping off point for the narrative. Explore a theme or idea from your perspective. Consider how the theme applies to your life and your experiences thus far. Themes like poverty, isolation, sacrifice, and talent are all good options for a personal narrative. For example, you may explore a theme like poverty by writing about your family's struggle with money and finances. You may write about having to defer college applications to work at your parents' business to make ends meet for your family. Read examples of personal narratives. That's number 4. Learn from good examples of the genre online and in print. Search for the top personal narratives online to see what a successful narrative looks like. Read and learn from these examples. You may read The Boys of My Youth by Joanne Beard, Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion, Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris, the live section of the New York Times. Number 5, start with a hook. Begin the personal narrative by drawing the reader in with a strong opening sentence. Use a rich description and detail in the opening. Start in action so the reader is grabbed right away and keeps reading. For example, I woke up surrounded by an oppressive fog. It obscured my vision and hindered my breathing. I couldn't remember where I was or how I had gotten there. It was eerily quiet. Some more examples of hooks for your personal narrative essay. Grabbers, hooks, and leads are interesting beginnings to catch your reader's attention at the start of your story. Start with the question. Begin by asking a question to catch the reader's attention. It will give hints about what the story will be about. For example, have you ever been to a museum? Let me tell you about an exciting trip that my family took to a museum this summer. Sound effects use onomatopoeia or sound words to grab the reader's attention. Boom, crash. The wind was howling outside of my house. We were having a terrible thunderstorm. I was very scared. Ready, set, action. Begin by starting your story with an exciting, intense, or scary moment. For example, the cave was dark and everything was silent. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. I knew this adventure was going to be something that I would never forget. Talking or dialogue. Start with the conversation or character speaking. Example, hold on tight, my dad yelled. We just finished buckling in as the coaster jerked into motion. This was my first roller coaster ride. Paint a picture. Use details to help your reader visualize what is happening in your story. For example, the sun was bright and it was a beautiful day. The sand was burning our feet, so we quickly ran and jumped into the water. Number six, set the scene with action. Ground the reader in the story by providing information on the main characters and the central conflict or theme. Tell the reader where the narrative is taking place and when it is taking place. Explain whether the story is about you and or you and your relationship with someone else in your life. For example, in Tony Gervino's essay, he sets the scene by providing setting, character, and narrative voice. It was July 1973. We were living in Scarsdale, New York, and he was 4 years older than I was. Although that seemed like decades, here's another example. The silence shattered. All around me, I could hear mechanical screeches and squeals. The echoes and shadows of voices broke through my muted musings. Number seven, move chronologically through the events. Do not jump to different moments in time or move from a past event to a present event and then go back again in the same paragraph. Go chronologically from event to event or moment to moment. This will make it easier for the reader to follow along with the narrative. For example, you may start with an event in childhood with you and your older sister and then move forward in time to the present day, focusing on you and your older sister as adults. Let's look at an example. Then, suddenly, the fog started to lift and my vision cleared. I was in a room attached by long strings of wire to more beeping, sputtering machines than I had ever seen in my life. Then is helping to show the sequence of events. It is a transition word and it is helping to move things in a chronological order. Number eight, use sensory detail and description. Focus on how things smelled, sounded, tasted, felt, and looked in the scene. Paint a vivid picture for the reader so they feel immersed in the narrative. Try to describe moments in the narrative based on the speaker's perspective. For example, you may describe the feeling of your mother's famous lemon cake as rich and zesty with a special ingredient that to this day I cannot identify. Here's another example. Then, suddenly, the fog started to lift and my vision cleared. I was in a room attached by long strings of wire to more beeping, sputtering machines than I had ever seen in my life. People dressed in white and blue and green and pink danced around the corners of my eyes. They were talking calmly to one another, though I could feel the urgency of their practiced movements. Here is a perfect example of sensory details being used to describe details. Number nine, finish with a moral or takeaway. Most personal narratives end with a reflection or analysis of the events. You may come up with a moral that you share with the reader based on your own experiences, or you may leave the reader with a takeaway thought that illustrates what you learned from your experiences. For example, you may end a personal narrative about your complicated relationship with your troubled sister by ending on a recent memory where you both enjoyed each other's company. You may leave the reader with a lesson you have learned about loving someone, even with all their messiness and baggage. Here's another example. He was alive, and I was alive, and neither of us would ever be the same. Number 10, revise the narrative for clarity and length. Here's an example of a simple personal narrative. I woke up surrounded by an oppressive fog. It obscured my vision and hindered my breathing. I couldn't remember where I was or how I had gotten there. It was eerily quiet until it wasn't. The silence shattered. All around me, I could hear mechanical screeches and squeals. The echoes and shadows of voices broke through my muted musings. My brain was having trouble processing. I felt blinded by the sudden onslaught of sensory overload and was lost in a hazy version of my own reality. Then, suddenly, the fog started to lift and my vision cleared. I was in a room attached by long strings of wire to more beeping, sputtering machines than I had ever seen in my life. People dressed in white and blue and green and pink danced around the corners of my eyes. They were talking to my family, to one another, though I could feel the urgency of their practiced movements. I remembered reaching down to turn on the radio, looking up at Paul, then headlights streaming through the passenger side window, screaming brakes, crunching metal, and nothing. Paul! I managed to breathe through parched lips. The unexpected sound forced the dancers to a halt. Paul! I said even louder, though it still couldn't have been more than a whisper. He's fine, son. Your friend will be fine, someone responded. He was alive, and I was alive, and neither of us would ever be the same. Now that you have written your personal narrative essay, it is very important to read over the narrative for any spelling, grammar, or punctuation errors. Review the narrative to make sure it is not too long. As a personal narrative, as personal narratives are usually short, no more than 1 to 5 pages long. You may also need to meet a specific length requirement if you are writing the personal narrative for a class. In today's lesson, we followed a step by step guide to writing our very own personal narrative essay. Thank you for watching and learning with me. I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.